Hello, welcome. We are live on YouTube and LinkedIn. This is all new. And today I am talking about hybrid work challenges and potential solutions. The more I talk to leaders, the more I'm hearing that we are seeing a huge move to hybrid work after this pandemic is over. And I love that leaders are thinking about, creating more flexibility and freedom for their people. That is awesome, rather than forcing everyone to come back to work. And there are some really specific challenges that come with a hybrid work environment that I wanted to talk about and get your insights on and share some possible solutions. So, before we even get started, let's talk about what hybrid even means. Hybrid can mean a lot of different things. It might mean that you have some employees that are 100% in the office, some employees are 100% remote. It might mean that some people are 60-40 split or 40-60 split, so that people are kind of at different times in the office or out. It might mean that there's full flexibility for people to decide how often they want to come into the office and how often they want to work remotely. So I would love to see in the comments, if you are here live, tell me, what does hybrid look like in your world? Are you creating a sort of policy around how often people are in and out of the office, or who can work remotely, or what is that looking like for you? I would love to hear what that looks like. So if you're on LinkedIn, either live or watching the replay, let me know in the comments what that looks like for you. And uh, and I'm going to talk about, like, ultimately hybrid means we're just not all in the same place together for work very often, if at all. And so this does tend to be a really challenging thing to manage. When everyone's remote, there's one way to kind of manage that environment. When everyone's in the office, there's one way that you're kind of managing that environment. This kind of creates almost two cultures or two experiences that our employees are having. And we have to kind of think about both of those and be really intentional about how we're managing that. The pandemic was kind of an equalizer here, right? So, because hybrid work has actually been in place for quite a while, have you ever called into a meeting or worked from home occasionally? Or, there's lots of times that people are working in the field or in different places, or we have different offices that people are in. So there is this kind of a bit of a feeling of hybrid work. But suddenly, when everyone went remote, there was this kind of equalization for those people that aren't in the head office, that had the same experience as everyone in the office. And so when I was talking to people through the pandemic, they were saying, it created more connection for those people who work remotely, because in the past they were kind of an afterthought, or, they felt that way even if they weren't. So when everyone was remote, there was this kind of equalization factor where everyone got the same experience. So now when we're moving to hybrid, there is that feeling of sort of two tiers. So some of the challenges that you may have had in the past, if you were the person working remotely or that sort of thing, those can help us to think about what this looks like now too. So I am going to share 5 specific challenges with working remote, with working in a hybrid world, and then a few solutions for each of them. So we'll have lots of potential solutions. I see 3 here. Challenges that I thrive when I can socialize and walk over to the desk of another person when things need to be done. Yeah. And 3, I know you are a leader in your organization, so that is a challenge. So if you happen to be leading live and in person in the office, and you have some team members that are there live with you and some that aren't, there's going to be a very different experience. So this is something to really think about. I'm going to share some thoughts on that. So I mean, there are tons of challenges we could talk about. And from a strategic standpoint, there are, like, I would really recommend you start being strategic with some principles around work and that sort of thing. But for today, I'm going to talk about 5 specific things that you can anticipate. First of all, ineffective meetings. We're going to talk about like what that looks like when some people are there and some people aren't, and how to do that better. Secondly, loss of culture. How do you keep your culture cohesive in this hybrid world? Third, lack of connection. How do you connect with all of the people, keep the remote people connected with the in-office people, etc.? Fourthly, decreased transparency or feeling of decreased transparency, especially for those people who are working remotely. How do you make sure you're keeping transparency, because that is key to trust? And big thing, distance bias. So this kind of relates, Sri, to you being that manager who loves to kind of walk over to someone's desk and collaborate live and in person. It kind of lends itself to distance bias, which affects all of these. So we are going to tackle them one at a time. Let's go back to the first one, ineffective meetings. So tell me, maybe send a like, or like tell me in the comments, have you ever been the person who's remote for a meeting and you're calling in on that like Star Trek looking phone, and so you're on like a conference call, but then there's other people in the meeting room? Have you ever been that person who had to call in when there was other people there? I would love to hear. Give me a yes. I've been the remote one in a meeting. Because if you have been that way, you may have experienced, a feeling of not being fully engaged in a meeting. You may have been kind of interrupted or talked over, or had trouble kind of putting your hand up virtually to say, share your thoughts. It is challenging when you are the remote person. And so and there was actually a study from Owl Labs that found that 67%, this was done in 2019 before the pandemic even hit, but they found that 67% of remote workers said that being interrupted or talked over was a challenge in meetings. So it's there. It happens. And if you're that remote person, you can't see the whiteboard that people are writing on. There's just a lot of challenges. You can't read all the body language that's happening in that meeting. You definitely feel like you're missing out. It is not an engaging experience. So as we move to hybrid, this brings this difficulty back. So here are some potential solutions for you. First of all, what I call engagement tracking. So make a list of everyone who is attending the meeting, the people who are there live and the people who are there virtually. And every time they share an idea, ask a question, engage, check off beside their name and look for equal check marks across your list. So if you notice that someone hasn't interacted as much as others, start calling on them specifically or asking them for their ideas or solutions, so that you can track, like, how am I interacting with different people across this group. This is something that for years I did as a facilitator, both live in rooms together and virtually, just kind of making sure that we have a list and check off how often do people interact, so that we're making sure that everyone is engaged. So you can do that in your meetings. It just takes more intentionality. Secondly, make everyone remote. So as you think about how you're designing an office of the future, I know a lot of companies are thinking about the office for collaboration, and it's all going to be about meeting spaces and that sort of thing. That's great. There are definitely opportunities to bring people together to collaborate. And you may want to consider having a lot of individual spaces, like telephone booth style or that sort of thing, so that even if there are some people that are in the office together, everyone actually joins the meeting remotely via a separate computer, so that it feels like there's an equal kind of an equal environment or experience for everyone. So make everyone remote, even if they're not, separately and dialing in all together. Thirdly, default to shared docs and virtual whiteboards. Don't use the big whiteboard in a meeting room if you have some people remote and some people live. Instead, share a screen, share a whiteboard, use Mural or Jamboard or Miro, whatever your choice is, and use that virtual whiteboard instead of the live one that the remote people can't see. Use a shared doc, like a Google Doc for your agenda that everyone can see, and for your meeting minutes, have someone be typing in them. Everyone can maybe add to them. So do everything as much as possible on shared docs, cloud-based software, so that everyone has that same experience with all of the things you're using or using to communicate in your meeting. And then finally, in big meetings especially, use breakouts. Incorporate breakouts, break people into smaller groups so that they can have some discussions, then be able to bring ideas back as a group. If you've never heard of Liberating Structures, check out Liberating Structures. There's actually an app, and there is a website that gives you different ways to engage people that really frees up ideas and people's engagement in things. One of the ones that I really like and is a super simple liberating structure is the 1, 2, 4, all, which means when you're asking a question or solving a problem, you give people time individually, one person, and then time in a pair with a second person. That ensures that both of them are sharing their ideas, and then put 4 people together, so the 2 pairs come together and share, and then you bring it back to the group. This is a really great way of really freeing up ideas from everyone on the team. If you've ever done just like opened up the floor to brainstorming, you've probably noticed that there's just a few people that share. So especially in remote or hybrid meetings, pair up people, give them time individually, put them in a small breakout of 2 people together, join those breakouts together for 4, and then bring them back all together so that you're engaging everyone. So those are some tips to help with ineffective meetings if you're in a hybrid world. Okay, our second piece is loss of culture. So first of all, what is culture? If you have a definition of culture, type that in the chat. What would you say culture is? What is culture to you? Because we sometimes, I think, first of all, it's a word that's used widely in so many ways. And we are specifically talking about corporate culture or organizational culture, team culture right now, not about the wider, broader culture. But we often confuse culture with connection or engagement or employee experience and all of these other things. So culture, when I'm talking about culture, it is not, culture shouldn't be dependent on, the foosball table or having beer after work or physical space in your environment. If that's what you're making culture dependent on, then that is kind of the veneer over top of your culture. And we want to kind of dig deeper. Culture isn't just about connection, although connection can help increase culture. Culture is about the pattern of behaviors of the people across your organization. And it's usually based on their beliefs, their attitudes, their values. And this all stems from the experiences they have at work that helps them to think about what's important around here and what the norms are. So it's how things happen in your organization or team. When you were all in person in one place, you might have had values on the walls in conference rooms or around the office as reminders. And we often rely on like the design of our office to provide places for culture to happen. Now we have to be more intentional about this, with some people remote, some people in the office. And so we want to start with, here's our tips for culture. Define your culture and values. Now, this is work we actually do, so I would love to work with you on it. But if first of all, redefining your culture if you're going to be hybrid. Challenge whether the culture that you had is still the culture that you want in a hybrid world. So do take a look at your current culture, your desired culture for the future, and what will help you be successful in a hybrid world, what will help you be successful being really agile and innovative for the future, because the change isn't going to happen. So do take some time to, challenge whether the culture you currently have and the values you currently have really still hold and are going to be effective in the future. So define that really clearly and get clear about the values that create that, or the behaviors that create that culture. What are the behaviors that are important, that create the values that indicate that people are really demonstrating those values and that culture that you want to have? And then thirdly, make it a habit to discuss those values intentionally at the beginnings of meetings. Recognize specific behaviors that fall in line with those values. You don't have them hanging on the wall in front of everyone, so how can you bring them to light as you come together at different times? How do you use values-based language and point out behaviors in all of your communications? You really have to be intentional about the culture that you're building, especially in a hybrid world, so everyone sees that culture come together, not just the people that are in the office. So make sure that that is way more intentional. Okay, the third challenge was all about lack of connection. So we know that connection isn't only built in person. We have a false belief around that. But if you've ever um, gone online dating, you know that you can learn a lot about a person, when you're meeting online. I know people who have gotten engaged before actually meeting the person. I have worked in virtual teams for 10 years and created really strong connections with people that I have never met or didn't meet for several years after meeting them online, and had really great connections. So we can connect virtually. We don't have to be in the same room to connect, although it does make it easier. We have to be more intentional when we are in a hybrid world. So first of all, start your team meetings with a specific connection point, a check-in. So we often use a check-in generator for this. I will pop a link to a couple of those in the comments after the video. So use a check-in in some way to have a personal check-in at the beginning of meetings. Make your get-togethers remote first. So rather than everyone, getting together live and in person to have a drink together after work or to go somewhere physically, think about how can these be virtual first so that everyone can participate equally. Maybe that means sending a cocktail set up to all of your remote workers so that they can participate in virtual cocktails. Maybe it means doing a virtual escape room instead of a live escape room. Figure out ways that you can make your get-togethers remote first so that those remote workers don't feel left out. Thirdly, partner remote and in-office people together as buddies or peer mentors so that they can be sharing different, what's happening in office, what's happening out of office, so that they feel more connected with people across the sphere. And then fourthly, an idea is to create some working sprints. Get people together for 45-minute or 90-minute working sprints. So everyone remotely or in office just checks in at the beginning of a video call and says, here's what I'm working on. You go ahead and work away for that time. You can set up a breakout room where people can jump in together if they want to discuss something as they're working. But you just create this feeling of people being able to work together, so that they feel like not so alone if they're working remotely. So those are some tips for creating more connection in a hybrid world. I would love to hear any tips that you have. So if you're here in the comments, let me know what kinds of ways have you seen be helpful to connect with people in a virtual world. or in a hybrid world especially. All right. Our fourth challenge is transparency, or the perceived lack of transparency. A lot of times when some people are remote and some people are in the office, the remote people get a sense of kind of FOMO, that they're missing out on things, on information, that they're not getting the whole story. So it's really, really important to really level up your transparency so that everyone trusts that they're getting as much information and don't feel out of the loop. So, first of all, tips. Let's see. In one-to-ones, if you are a leader or an employee at any level in an organization, and you're having one-to-one meetings with people because you saw them at the coffee station or they stopped by your desk or whatever is happening in the in-office experience, stop and ask yourself, who else should be involved in this discussion, or who else needs to know about this? And before you have a whole meeting with someone because they stopped by your desk, either invite the remote people who should be involved to that discussion, or pause that and move it to a virtual discussion, whether that's like a Slack channel or whatever that is. Just stop yourself from these one-to-one discussions, and really be intentional about who needs to be involved in this so that you're not excluding those people that are working remotely. Secondly, this sounds, maybe scary, but ban internal email. Don't allow people to email internally. Instead, get them using shared message boards or Slack channel or your intranet or whatever that shared space that you have to communicate. Use that rather than one-to-one emails where people might be left off the strain or CC'd on everything. Email just isn't the most effective communication. And we actually have a full sort of digital fluency guide to help you plan what channel to use for what communication. So hit me up in the comments if you are interested in seeing that. We have sort of a walkthrough of like how you can agree with your team, how you want to use the different channels you have access to for communication so that everything feels more transparent. And then thirdly, share no news messages. So people who are remote may think if they haven't heard anything that they're not hearing what's going on. Even if there's no message, there's nothing going on. So do share when there's no message to share. Send out like no change here, or no news to share on this project that's happening, or whatever it is. Share information about no information when you have that. I'm just checking the comments. So true about internal emails. We work on Teams. Yeah, use your Microsoft Teams, whatever it is. Figure out what communication channels you want to use for what, and be intentional about using that. Draw people back to that. If you're getting an email, email back and say, can you post this on Teams? Can you post this on Slack for the whole team to see? So really start setting those boundaries. Not only is email a drain, it's hard to manage follow-up or remember where things are with something. Yes, use a project management tool, far more efficient. Yeah, this is where our digital fluency tool really becomes helpful, because you work with your team on what are we communicating often, what's most effective, when is it not working. So for example, on our team, we have a project management software. So anytime we're communicating something about a specific client or a specific project, we put it in that section of the project management software. So I know I can go there and find all the information and communication about that client in one place, instead of having to scroll through email chains and try to figure out like where we left something. So do figure out that, have your communication channels nailed for increased transparency. Okay, finally, let's talk distance bias. This is, if you've ever heard the saying, out of sight, out of mind, this is what distance bias is. So we tend to gravitate towards those people who are closer, whether that is in location or people we've seen more recently, time, location, space, all of that. So the more often we see someone, the more likely we are to see them as productive, competent, promotable. In one study done by Stanford, they had call center employees and they randomly assigned them to work from home for 9 months or work in the office for 9 months. And what they found was the people working from home, it led to a 13% performance increase. So people working from home were working more minutes per shift, taking less breaks, less sick days, and doing more calls per minute, 4% more calls per minute. So they were more productive working from home. However, and by the way, they also reported more work satisfaction. Their turnover rate was cut in half, so more people stayed longer. But here's what happened. The promotion rate was fell for those who were working remotely. They did not get promoted as often as those who were in the office. So this is an example of distance bias, totally in effect. So here's what to do. First of all, educate your managers. Make sure they know, like, this is just a natural thing that our brains do. It will kind of put preference on those people you see most often. So we really have to be aware of it and challenge when we're thinking about who should be on this team or who should be promoted or who do I want to involve in this project, or like any opportunities that come up. Make sure your managers have this kind of view to challenge when they're doing, like, looking at these all being people in-house. Secondly, and this is one for you, Sri. You were talking about those conversations when you can, like, go up to the person in the office. Here's something to try. Leaders work remotely. So, and this sounds so counter to what we would think. We would think the leaders should be the one in the office, in person with people most often. But that is going to lead even more so to those challenges with distance bias. When you are working remotely, you are still the leader. You are going to be forced to create those relationships with remote employees and in-office employees the same. So, leaders, work remotely as much as possible if you're in a hybrid world. Don't default to going into the office. In fact, you probably need to put yourself out of the office more often. And finally, make sure that you're having extra touch points with remote workers. Think about all of those casual conversations, if you are in the office, that you're having at the coffee machine or the water cooler, or just as you're walking by each other. And make sure that you are intentionally setting up those same kinds of touch points with remote workers as much as possible. I am just checking in the comments. I'm seeing, didn't think of that. Sending out emails on no news is good. Yes, Maya. No news is a very good idea. Classic. Butts and seats equals productive. Yeah. Totally false narrative, but it is what we think. I see Sri mentioning distance bias, so you're already thinking about that. I love it, which is not true, FYI. I don't know what that is about, Amanda, but yes, if I said it, it's true. All right, so I hope that I have given you some tips that you can take away. We've talked about 5 specific challenges. I would love to help you with developing your leaders in a remote world. We have both online and, it's all online, but we have both live workshops and training for managers and virtual kind of on your own time training that people can take to help you to lead more effectively in a remote world. So please do let me know if you're interested in learning more. Make sure you subscribe on LinkedIn, hit the little bell, or on YouTube, hit the little bell if you're there, and follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you saw this video and let me know what other insights you have about a remote world. Thank you so much. And please, whether you're remote, hybrid, or in the office, make work awesome. It can be.